community living aspect for that wraparound service. So all those different pieces of the programming and all the different levels of providers, whether it be the therapy and care planning and medication help, all those kinds of things that would be received in the residential setting, but provided in individual home settings to truly provide that home and community-based service versus an extension of that institutional setting.
You're talking, Brittany, more of coming into the family home, correct?
No, not necessarily. I mean, just an individual. There's a lot, if you're talking in behavioral health context, which was mentioned here, behavioral health has intensive outpatient therapeutic settings where it's the wraparound service is provided in the individual's home, not necessarily a family home, but an individual living alone, an adult, it can be that nature too. But yes, coming into an individual's home versus a congregate living setting, which is kind of more of the core of that home and community.
Right. No, that's good feedback. We have not looked at any of that. I mean, we'll look and see what other states have, but I understand what model you're talking about now.
Well, even it used to be next door. Your West Central has a model. Southeast operates on it as well. Some of the intensive outpatient behavioral health programming like that, just to have a closer, it's not say that's a good model, but I mean, at least it's something and would give a benefit to start.
So are you just talking about expanding it since the model exists already for all of our folks, or is it?
The models that they're operating on wouldn't necessarily be a fit depending on which population you're trying to apply it to. But in general, the overarching model is, I mean, would work. It's providing everything that they would receive in that congregate setting in an individual's home, allowing more, least restrictive preference of living, all of that. But it's truly that epitome of what wraparound should and would look like.
That was interesting. I mean, and yeah, we can take that back. And again, I'm not 100% sure that the behavioral health context fits exactly on this, but totally understand what you're saying. After you explained it a little bit, I get it. Any other comments, Dan, you see before I go through this last one?
I think Brittany, do you still have your hand raised?
Nope, I'm good, sorry.
We're good.
Okay, so, and then 14% towards infrastructure, Care Connect platform. I can talk a little bit about that on the next slide. I'd like to make some more movement in documentation and reporting of quality measures. That's something we're trying to do across the entire agency, not just in home and community-based. Client-facing interface for eligibility and payment systems. I can talk a little bit more about that in terms of making it more user-friendly to be able to go on the web and download some of the information. We do have portals for eligibility, and providers do have a portal for MMIS, but making some upgrades there, and project management. And so there we go. Okay, so we did submit our spending plan to CMS, and please know that we have to provide a quarterly spending report. You can go online anytime and pull that down. And some states haven't spent any money, so we are happy that we are at least moving along. We understand that people would like us to be as expeditious as possible, but you can pull down our quarterly spending plan anytime. So that is not only the narrative, but also the actual spending. Second thing, we hired Myers and Stouffer. We already do business with Myers and Stouffer. They do our auditing for some of our other facilities. And so they are a known entity to us. They also have an HCBS team that they work with there as well. So it's not auditors we have doing this, but we have hired their HCBS team to serve as a project manager. They will be the third party. And so as they get going, we just had our first kickoff meeting with them last week. As they get going, we're talking about how we can do more frequent report outs, that they will be responsible for, how they can do webinars for stakeholders, And so we'll be introducing you all to that team as well. And then the last one, design and development spaces about the self-portal. So again, this gets back to the client interface. We want to make some changes and upgrades to spaces about how it would be easier for our clients to go in. They can upload documents now. They can generally see some things, but states have made more progress that we have in terms of making that portal more accessible, more user-friendly. And we have our spaces, and I hope I don't say this wrong, our E&E, our eligibility system goes out for bid in May of 23. And so we will be moving from a design phase to a maintenance and operation phase. And so as many of you know, this system has taken, just like MMIS, has taken a while to get certified. We're in the middle of certification right now with CMS on our spaces system. Once it becomes certified, then it will move to a maintenance and operation contract. And so we will have an RFP out for that business as it moves to that. So in addition to trying to make these upgrades and ensure that we pass the certification for CMS on the spaces system, we also need to move to the maintenance and operation. So that's going to be a big lift for that team, and Jessica is the head of that team as well. Any questions on the infrastructure piece? Happy to go back and talk about some of these others if you'd like.
This is Roxanne, and this might be a pie in the sky question idea. The eligibility for DD is highly cumbersome, as we all know, and the workforce shortage has impacted that. So if you're needing a psychological evaluation, intelligence testing to try to get through the eligibility process, it's very difficult. I just had a family who actually had an appointment set up to travel all the way out to Fargo for testing until we intervened, and then really they ended up just doing a Vineland with them. But you know, some of the families are being told, you know, you're 6 months out. So are we considering anything at all to try to relieve that burden around eligibility for people trying to apply for DD?
So I don't know, Tina, if you have a different answer, but this really has to be about home and community-based services. We had to make quite a narrative discussion about how some of these infrastructure then feeds back into the home and community-based workforce and the home and community-based services. I would have to look and see if other states have been successful in redesigning eligibility processes, but we'd have to really think about how that then ties to a home and community-based service. I'm not sure on that one, Tina. And I do know, well, I'll stop and see if Tina has thoughts.
I think you were just going to go there. And I was going to say we have not at this point looked a lot into the eligibility, Roxanne, just really because of 2256 that is doing the intensive study on our eligibility system.
I know that Alvarez did also mention to us, the consultant doing 2256, about using ARP funds. And I know that on June 30th, they're going to come and present their findings on 2256 to the Human Services Interim Committee. And so if they have ideas, then we should ask them. But again, we'd have to somehow link it back to HCBS services and providers. We'd have to figure out how to do that. So they might have clever ideas.
Thanks. Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's about access, because the population of people who have developmental disabilities have to come through that portal in order to access HCBS services. It's the only way to do it. But yeah, that would be great if they've got some ideas. So I'll watch.
We should ask them.
Caprice, you have a question in the chat?
Brittany, you're up.
Is this the one from Veronica about the training or no?
Yes, that's what I saw.
Okay, Jake, do you want to talk about that? Because I think that was Nancy's plan to go back and take a look at QSP provider training and do an overhaul of those trainings. And then if we can't answer your questions, we will have Nancy do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Nancy's been working obviously with Caprice and the Medicaid team around, what we're going to do specifically through our QSP provider hub. So they're working on training, but we're also trying to figure out what other training those QSPs need. We're talking about behavioral health. We're talking about person-centered planning training. We're talking about, how to do basic tasks. As we found that some of the folks that, especially some of our new Americans, aren't familiar with just the basic things that some of the folks they're serving, like, for example, the types of food they cook for the folks that they're providing services to. So it's an array of services that need additional training, or different topics that need to be provided training about. We have a vehicle now with the QSP hub that we're contracting with UND for at this time. So, and she's got a number of ideas about, Nancy, has a number of ideas about what else we could do with them. So.
And I think if I can, Jake, I think a lot of that came out of COVID when we had to figure out how to get people trained pretty quickly. And so some of it was moving the format over to online format. Some of it was figuring out, when you could piggyback trainings on the other. And so then I think we started to take a look at what does the curriculum look like? What does the modality look like? And are we covering the most pertinent issues? So I know a lot of this came out of discussions we had during COVID.
Absolutely. And, we've developed some terrific training in the developmental disabilities world, utilizing some of our MFP rebalancing funds. And so are there some opportunities that we could find to do some joint training or utilize some of the development that was done through Minot State's curriculum for the QSPs as well? So.
Yeah, I think there's kind of twofold going on with that workforce too. I know in the back into the workforce retention and stuff, there's some of the funds that we've earmarked to do a big overhaul on the training in just kind of in the whole HCBS world.
Yeah.
Not just specific to QSPs, not just specific to the DD world, to really look at across our system. I mean, like Jake said, DD's got the modules, but we also know that isn't, we haven't looked at our modules in years. While we do updates on them and stuff like that, we haven't looked at what we're doing. And so what we would like to do is bring somebody in to do an overhaul of kind of the training. Let's look at it. Let's see what makes sense, because we are hearing from, especially in the DD provider world, we're hearing that training is very cumbersome, and it's and then what we require over here in the DD side maybe isn't what the QSP side is. And so we'd like to take this opportunity with these funds to try and see how can we streamline some of that. And if I meet the qualifications for training over in the DD side, I can also do it in the QSP side. I can also do it over here. And then the other world is our self-directed. We say that the self-directing folks have access to our training modules, but really, how do they do it? We want to make sure that whatever we do with the workforce, that it includes those families that are choosing to self-direct, and for their staff to have access to that too. So it's kind of a complete overhaul of training. And to your question, Veronica, yes, we would be involving stakeholders. That's my envision with the consultant that would come in. Let's look at what's working, what's not working, get some feedback from everybody to, because of course, every group is going to have a little bit of different thoughts on how to improve it. So that would be the plan.
And actually, Tina, this might be a great time to say that I just had a conversation